All right, okay. So why would the intellectuals, what you've just made is an intellectually rigorous case. Why would an intellectual, as you use the term, be loath to look at that intellectually rigorous argument, be loath to examine the data the way you did?
Well, he's happy with the data that he got. Why would he examine? Why would he go further? He looks at the numbers. The numbers say what he thinks it should say. Hey, that's it. Right. QED, and he moves on to the next great crusade.
Intellectuals in society, once again. The very phrase income distribution is tendentious. Wealth can be created only after capital and labor have reconciled their competing claims and agreed to terms on which they can operate together in the production of wealth. Close quote. Income distribution, the very phrase is tendentious. How come?
Income is not distributed. Newspapers are distributed. Social Security checks are distributed. And one time, milk was distributed. Income is not distributed. People earn it directly from those to whom they provide some good or service. And the argument made by many people, you see, is that it's a question of capital and labor have conflicting interests in dividing up the income.
Right.
No. There is no income to divide up before they first reconcile their conflicting interests and decide on what terms they're going to produce that income. There is no there's no manna from heaven for them to fight over.
You make the point, what I'm coming to is the economic crisis that we went through 18 months ago. But we'll start with the Great Depression, where all discussions of economic crises should start, probably. And you make the point that there are two large features of the Great Depression. One was the stock market crash, and the other was the enormous government intervention, which began under Herbert Hoover and continued and expanded under FDR, but began quickly, in other words.
Yes.
And so you say, so you have two large facts here. It's a very good question, which actually caused or prolonged the Great Depression, and it's a question that very few intellectuals actually examine.
Well, one way of examining it would be to just look at the time period. The stock market crash occurred in October 1929. Now, there's data on unemployment month by month. 2 months after the stock market crash, unemployment peaked at 9%. It then began to decline irregularly till about 6.3% by June of 1930.
Indicating the economy was attempting to recover on its own. Right.
In June 1930, the government stepped in with its first massive intervention with a Smoot-Hawley tariff, passed despite a public appeal by more than 1,000 economists from the leading universities saying, don't do it. They did it anyway. It shows how much influence economists have. Within 6 months after that, unemployment hit double digits for the first time, and it never came down for the remainder of the decade, even for 1 month. And so the stock market crash brought you up to 9%, and that was starting to fizzle out. The government steps in to help, and that hits double digits, and it eventually got up to a peak of 25%, and it didn't fizzle out until the end of the decade.
All right. Listen to a list, and then I'll ask you a question. Chairman of the Fed, Benjamin Bernanke, B.A. at Harvard, Ph.D. at MIT, Professor of Economics at Princeton, Director of the National Economic Council, Lawrence Summers, undergraduate degree MIT, Doctor at Harvard, youngest tenured Professor of Economics and Harvard History, eventually President of Harvard, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, A.B. Dartmouth, M.A. Johns Hopkins. He's the underperformer in the group. How did this group of intellectuals acquit themselves in handling the nation's economic crisis in 2008?
Well, first of all, they didn't handle it. The politicians handled it.
Ah.
And so even if you were to say that these guys really could have done a great job had they had the unbridled power and so forth, they don't have the unbridled power. One of the problems with experts is that experts are hired by other people. And so you never know what the expert would have done. In fact, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal some time back that what the policies that are being followed in Washington are the direct opposite of the policies that Summers advocated when he published before he got to Washington.
Right. Right.
So we should never assume that experts are just people they're supplying information to politicians who are trying to do good.
So surely, though, the intellectuals had the notion that the government should step in is a hangover from the understanding of what took place during the New Deal, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so in other words, the intellectuals, the politicians are acting within a world of options that intellectuals have created over the decades.
Yes.
Right. And are you impressed by that, the intellectual framework?
No.
No, all right. All right. Segment 3, intellectuals and vision. Intellectuals in society. The vision around which most contemporary intellectuals tend to coalesce has features that distinguish it from other visions prevalent in other segments of contemporary society or among elites or masses in earlier times. Close quote. What is the vision to which contemporary intellectuals subscribe?
That intellectuals should influence, if not control, the kinds of decisions that are made in society, and more especially that they should promote the transfer of decisions from the masses to those who have, quote, more intellect. And given how I conceive of knowledge being its distribution, that would mean transferring decisions from where there's 99% of the knowledge to where there's 1% of the knowledge. And against that background, it's not at all surprising that things like central planning simply don't produce as good results as allowing all the millions of people to react in the marketplace.
All right. Let me ask you a question that came in from Twitter. Travis814. All these questions are limited to 140 characters, so get ready. It's coming at you, but it'll go fast. Why does the liberal progressive mindset have such a stranglehold within the intellectual academic world? Why should the vision that you just described be so prevalent among intellectuals?
Well, among the many reasons, most academic intellectuals have no experience, no serious experience outside the academy. I remember I was once an economist for AT&T when it was the world's largest corporation. And when I returned to the academic world, they welcomed me as the prodigal son. You see, it returned from the evils of corporate America to the true nirvana of academia. And not only do they have no experience, they have every incentive to believe that they are brighter than other people and no more than other people because they've been told that all their lives. I mean, you become a top intellectual because you've passed through all these successive filters. You've gotten into the best colleges. You've gotten into the best graduate schools.
Or even from second grade on, the teachers are responding to you as a kid who passes tests especially well.
Yes.
Right.
And so you have all of that in your background.
You write in Intellectuals in Society, if you happen to believe in free markets, judicial restraint, traditional values, and other features of what you call the tragic vision, there's no personal exaltation arising from those beliefs. But to be for social justice and saving the environment puts you on a higher moral plane.
Yes.
So the question here is, can it really be that simple that intellectuals across the American landscape tend to embrace the vision that you've described sheerly out of self-flattery and self-pleading?
Yes.
It is.
Don't forget, human beings have an enormous power of rationalization. Think of all the absurd things that have been believed throughout all of history. And I guess the one common denominator is that those absurd things typically were very flattering to those who believed them. They had the one true faith. They were the vanguard of the proletariat. You know, you just run through the whole list of the things.
By the way, I've been reading some Marx. Mm-hmm. I can't understand how anyone ever took that seriously. I mean, ever took it seriously.
Well, what are you reading? Sentence
by sentence, it's, I began with the Communist Manifesto that he and Engels wrote.
It's a magnificent, if you want a model for propaganda, it is the masterpiece.
But there's absolutely no contact with actual economic reality.
No, there's no need for that, as many people are showing. You can become president of the United States with no contact with economic reality.
All right.